Hello, this is Hardin Coleman. I'm the faculty director for the Center for Character and Social Responsibility at Boston University's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. You're listening to our first season of the Caring, Character, and Community, the Center's podcast. In this season, we'll be learning from leaders about how they integrate the ethic of caring, a focus on their own and others' character development, and a commitment to serving the needs of the community in order to guide and inform their leadership in times of crisis. This is part three of our inaugural season, which will focus on bringing you the perspective of four youth-serving community-based organizations. Today, in this episode, we'll be having a conversation with Alex Oliver Dávila, who is the executive director of the Sociedad Latina, which is focused on creating the next generation of Latinx leaders. So, Alex, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, great. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your organization and what you're trying to achieve and a little bit of its history.
Yeah, absolutely. Sociedad Latina has been in existence since 1968, and it's actually the oldest Latino youth organization dedicated to predominantly working with Latina youth. And we work with young people beginning in middle school all the way through post-secondary. We're providing a coach for 2 years, either for college or career. And we also have a very strong alumni program. And our program focuses on work readiness, skill development. It provides academic support in all the major transitions from middle school to high school to a college or career. We focus on civic engagement, and we focus on arts and culture with really celebrating culture, particularly Latina culture and language. And our goals are really that young people graduate with high school with next steps, either into college or career, that they're civically engaged, and that they have work readiness skills and experience to be able to enter the workforce.
Mm-hmm. Great, very exciting work, and as you know, that combination of college and career readiness and civic engagement is something that this center is very interested in, kind of exploring ways to help that grow across many youth. So we're not at the end of the 2 years of incredible disruption driven by the pandemic. As people say, the twin pandemics of the COVID and racism. Coming to grips with deep polarization in our society, recognition of massive inequalities, and also some significant indifference, if not aggressive, responses against changing our society to be more equitable, open, and inclusive. And we're in the middle of a mayor's race right now, where a lot of those issues are percolating, and we know we have a few more years to go. So in that time, could you share with us some of what this crisis has meant for you and how it affected your work and the lives of the youth with whom you're working?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I would say that for people thinking that this is done and we're over, I think there's going to be many years of recovery, particularly for the immigrant communities, Black communities, Latina communities, and just underrepresented communities who we know about the income inequality. Massachusetts is the #1 state for income inequality for Latina families.
Mm-hmm.
Our organization, as usual, we have pivoted. There's been so many instances. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, we actually turned our entire building into services for families who came right off the plane with their kids and were able to get support in filling out FEMA forms, enrolling their student in school, getting SNAP, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So similarly, we pivoted right away, and we were able to provide families. We were ready to give every student a laptop, and thankfully Boston Public Schools did that, so that was great. But everything from A to Z. I think when we first had the shutdown, talking with families on a weekly basis, asking, what do you need? Where are you at? What is happening? We work with many undocumented families. So I think the number one thing was really being able to get monetary resources. So we gave away actual dollars, and we did that before there were any dollars that were being given to organizations to give out directly. We were able to send food home to families. We sent kits of music. So we have a music program. We sent all of our young people in the music program instruments, ways that they could record. We sent STEM kits home. We have a STEM program so that students would have things hands-on. We sent masks, A to Z, and we were in constant contact with all of our families, just providing those very basic needs. And then we were also part of Coalition. So we were part of the Mass Immigrant Collaborative, which is a statewide collaborative. And we were able to raise about $6 million to give out to undocumented families, and tons and tons of food as well. And then we did things like have vaccine. We worked with CIC, who was the big provider in the state. And we were able to share with them, like, where are the best places to actually set up vaccine tents. We were able to bring community members, make appointments, get them there, provide translation. We're part of the Latino Network also, which is all the Latino-led organizations in Boston. We put together a number of vaccine clinics. We had webinars for families that were bilingual about the actual vaccine. We did a lot of on the ground early work, just giving out masks, giving out information, and just keeping people abreast. So we did all of those pieces and still had program. So we still worked with young people, and we were remote. Now we're hybrid, but really whatever it took to meet our community where it was at is what we did.
You know, that sounds exhausting. So I have two questions. One, what drew you to this work? And also, how do you sustain yourself in this demanding time?
It's truly exhaustion. It doesn't even begin to describe. I think it's been a blur. But I think what drives me is knowing all of the assets that the Latinx community has, and all of the barriers and the challenges, having grown up in a pretty wealthy neighborhood, although we were not wealthy. We lived in a housing development, not great circumstances. And I know what it's like, to have all of these challenges. And so having also experienced a lot of racism moving to Boston, that was very detrimental to me. I take passion from all that. I take strength from all of those adversities. And it drives me. Young people drive me. And so seeing some of the barriers and challenges that our young people face, and knowing all the number of assets that they bring, that really just drives me. And that is what has sustained me. And I feel, I'm very lucky. I was able to work from home. Many people didn't have that luxury. I didn't have to leave my house. I could have, groceries delivered. I was in a different space, and I cannot forget where I came from and all the challenges and struggles my family faced, and seeing, many of our families that we work with having, those similar challenges. I just knew that I had to get busy, and I had to be able to do something. And, I was not alone, obviously. I thank all of my colleagues who did double time. We all worked our normal job, and then there were other layers added, because we were not only doing the basic needs, we were running programs for students, but we were also part of all of these conversations citywide, which took another amount of time, but we had to be there. We had to bring voice to the Latinx community and the struggle that was happening.
So in your work, how does the ethic of care influence your decision-making, and particularly your leadership in this organization? And can you give us an example of where that ethic of caring really drove you to a particular and important decision?
That's a big question, but I think I'm straight up Latina. That is like front and center. And with that, comes a lot of cultural practices. So one of those is collectivism. And I'm a firm believer, everything that I do, everyone that's ever worked with me knows that that's my style. My style is very inclusive. And I like to provide space for my colleagues, for young people to be able to have a voice in the direction of where we're going, what we're doing. And I also, part of my culture is we're very like touchy feely, and I do bring that. That is part of who I am. And I'm very empathetic, which is can also not be the best thing sometimes, because I think I might take on too much, and I have to. I have learned over the years as I've gotten older that there's some things I can't take on.
Can you give an example? Can you give an example of where the being too empathic, too engaged, too caring has not worked out the way you anticipated or would have liked?
So many examples. I think one example is having a staff person who was burnt out in their job. And so I really work with that staff person to help them to find another place within the organization. And we're a really small organization, so it had a lot of repercussions on other like unintended things because of moving that person to that other position, which of course, because I really cared about that person, I cared about their health, I cared about what was happening. It did, cause some other ripple effects, which, I had to deal with. And I think another example is that I always want to bring home every young person that is homeless. And I have brought young people to live with me. And I realize that that's a wonderful thing. And I'm proud that I've done that. But it also, it has repercussions on my family. I have, other children. And so I really have had to work on those pieces of my empathy and where I can draw the line and what are the things that I can do. And it hasn't been anything so ugly, that I would say I would never do that again. But they are things that there's a certain amount of energy you have as a human and what you can do, and you have to have some boundaries for yourself and for your family.
That's a critical point. It's as if as you care from a leadership role, caring and doing from one person may feel like care is being taken away from another, and balancing that, getting the right balance between that the system and the individual is an ongoing challenge in the work. And then as a leader, how do you create a caring organization that also recognizes its limits? A very, very difficult and demanding work. So you have lots of constituents. I mean, this brings up the next logical conversation is about, you have lots of constituents, not of all of whom agree or have the same needs. So and are difficult to balance. So can you give example? Can you share with us who are your constituents? Who do you see as your major people that you serve and who are engaged in the work that you're doing? And how do you balance their competing demands?
Yeah, I mean, I think our major constituents are our young people. So, middle school, high school, college career students that we work with, they're number one. Our other constituents are the families. They, these are children of people. We're not their parents, and we have to recognize that. Our other constituents include schools. We work with a lot of schools, have really relationships. And we have many other constituents, but I'll use those because those demonstrate some of the tension pieces. So, parents who want to be very, very involved in their young person's life. Of course, I get it. I'm a mom. I want to be very involved. But having a background in youth development, I also understand the stages of youth development and when young people are forming their independence and they kind of need to have a little bit of space. So I think there's a natural tension that happens when, we've had some parents who come in and say, I want my kids' check. So we pay some students get paid. We have paid and unpaid opportunities and for the paid opportunities, we've had parents come in and get it. They want their child's paycheck, and we
Yep.
don't give it to them.
Yep.
And that's, that is, we consider that that's the work of the young person. We're respecting the young person. Similarly, when there's information, if it's not something that's dangerous to the young person or to somebody else, we cannot share everything with the family. So there's definitely like that natural tension that happens, and all we can do is work towards supporting a more positive relationship. I don't want to say that it's not positive, because I do think it is, but we just work towards like, how can we create a more positive relationship? How do we provide training for families so they know like the stages of youth development and like what's happening? And then I think the natural tension of working in a school. We want the same thing, we have the same goals, but it's a different way of getting there. I think our tension is that we're very much focused. Of course, we want young people to be academically successful, but really we're focused on their character, on who they are, like on their social emotional development, and celebrating all the assets that they bring. And that doesn't always go together.
Can you say more about how that you're focused on their character development, their personal development as an organizing principle, creates a conflict with both parents and schools? It sounds like that sometimes that priority may not be shared. Can you give an example of that, particularly with the schools? I think that's something very important for us to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we work with young people, so we look at things like critical thinking. We look at things like, how are you a better how are you more involved in your community, and how does that help you develop character, and how does that add to the community, and what are the positive things that you bring when you're actually involved in identifying problems and helping to make change around those problems. I think that's where we often struggle with schools, where it is very driven by grades. What did you get, where you're at? And of course that's important, but for us, it's really important that a young person, first of all, feels proud of who they are. So we really focus on culture. And again, predominantly we work with Latina youth, but we work with all young people. So we created our own cultural curriculum, which is about exploration and figuring out who you are, whatever that means to you, and really viewing that as a strength. And I don't think that many schools get that or understand, why is that important? Because every day that you're walking on the street, you get barraged by negative stereotypes about yourself. So if you have a very strong understanding about who you are, where you come from, and you can feel great about it, then that, that does lead to better grades. I mean, there's a lot of research around that. And again, the civic engagement piece, like being involved. I don't think that all parents in schools, are looking for their child to be super vocal sometimes. And that's what we do. We're working with young people to find their voice. And that can sometimes be a little bit of a tension with families and with schools. When young people organize within their own schools, which has happened. We want to hear them speak nicely to us about important things that we value. But when that doesn't meet their needs, I want to lift up what I heard as your definition of character, or what I hear you talking about character, as a combination of strong sense of self, clear values about having a positive impact in the world, the skills it takes to take those steps. And it's not just who am I as a being and my understanding of my culture, but what am I going to do with it? How do I serve the community? So is it correct to say that you see character and a commitment to community as linked? They're not separate things, but they work together. Yes, I would definitely agree with that.
Which is very demanding. So somehow personal development and to some degree schools may be at risk for this, and their focus on performance and academics may be more valued than the development of the person. They think they're preparing people for finding their place in the world, not necessarily preparing people to engage and make the world a better place. And schools don't have that mission, and that's where you step in. Is that a fair understanding how your organization fits within this ecology?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. And, I would push back and say that I think schools could do both. And honestly, I think we as out of school time have played a role in academic support, which I don't think that should be what we're doing.
Uh-huh.
We spend a ton of resources around academic supports for young people because they are being failed in their school system. And I don't think that should be our role. I would prefer that we focus on, all the character development and all of the enrichment pieces, but unfortunately we don't. But I do think both can be done.
Yeah.
And that's why I do think it's important that schools and out of school time work very, very closely together, and that all of those pieces are valued. And that the character building, the civic engagement should be just as important because you can be the smartest person, but if you're a jerk out in the world, you're going to be a very lonely, isolated person. And we know the effects, that has on mental health, et cetera, of being isolated, et cetera, if you don't know how to work on a team, how to love. Love is huge in our organization. It's like fabric of our being.
So how would you, as a community partner, how do you think schools could grow their work around character development and civic education, while also addressing the academic needs that you've identified as well? Yeah. How do schools think that through? How would you encourage them to think that through?
I think there's a couple avenues. One is you can partner with an out of school time organization that does that, and you can work together. And we have worked with other schools around different projects for schools that haven't been nervous about that civic engagement piece. You can bring it into the classroom. You can have students work on different pieces, like what's happening in your community, walk around, look around, read the paper, whatever it is. You can work with a partner and you can bring that to light. I think the other piece is in terms of, higher education, including that as part of teacher training and like how important it is to make sure that you're servicing that side of somebody's soul, because it is really important. We know the value and the self-confidence that comes when you're involved in your community and feel like you're actually like making a difference and having input. So I think those are like two specific ways that things could happen. And again, with the partnership, it can, out of school time, we've gone into the classroom for schools that have been open to that. And we've done like training on civic engagement and organizing 101, and we worked on something together. So I think there's lots of opportunity for that to happen.
So this maybe sound hopeful, but on my part, or maybe I believe something's happening. I realize I may not be objective, so I want to get your perspective. So I believe that as we've come to this end of this 30 years, what people call ed reform, which really focus a lot of energy and resources on improving performance in math and English. All very important. So I'm not suggesting that's not important work and critical work. But sometimes it came at the cost of the guidance counselor, the social emotional work, the time spent on helping teachers learn how to care for the kids in their classroom in addition to teach them. Even though we see a lot of evidence in the schools that are successful, like the people who win the School to Move Prize here in Boston, the investors work, almost all of them have high support. Social emotional learning is one of their foundational principles. I'm thinking we're coming back to re-including that in schooling, re-including that in our expectations of schools, of teachers, and also bouncing the community. Am I being optimistic, or do you see that language shifting, particularly sometimes as a result of the crisis, because we know how many children are coming back to school traumatized, significant loss in our abilities to our kids' social skills development. They're behind a year, and people are attending. Am I being optimistic, or do you see that as well? Not enough, but a move.
I want to be optimistic with you. I am really hoping to see that. I also don't think we have a choice. I don't think that we can just go right back into uh, just academics.
Yep.
My daughter's school, that what they told me first thing is we're not focusing on academics, we're focusing on the social emotional development and the connections. And as we saw, Lawrence High School is not the only high school where all of these, tensions have happened. So
Yep.
I'm just saying only because they've been in the news, but they're not the only one. And
Yep.
it's very sad that, it's a predominantly Latinx community and that's the focus. But that example is because we haven't been in school. So I don't feel like we have a choice. But it does seem like the more that I'm hearing, especially as there's federal funds coming in, that there's a lot of conversation around the mental health. Mental health, it is so real. I mean, I've seen this on the ground with the young people I work with in my own household, that it has had really deep repercussions for our young people. And so I feel like we don't have a choice, but I feel hopeful that I've heard a lot of educators really talking about this and really focusing on like, we need to make sure that our young people are okay and that they feel connected and they feel part of community, and they feel loved and accepted.
I'm hoping that we can begin to identify omnibus measures of wellness so we can see how well we're doing and not doing. Again, you know me, I'm a little bit of a data nerd, and so I like to have those ways we can measure it so we can see. Not that the measurement is all important, but we need more information so we can see how well we're doing, where we're doing well, where we're not doing well.
Yeah, and with some stories, right? So we can do data and do some stories that will tell us where. But I agree with you. We kind of need to know.
That's why we're good partners, because you get the stories, I'll get the data, and we'll work together. So Alex, thank you so much for your time. But before you go, I would love it if you could think of if there's something you would tell your younger self, because the people, our audience for this podcast are people who are either early on or aspiring to be leaders in their community, either in schools or in agencies like yours. So if you had something you would say to that person, your younger person, remember this or believe this or take this, do this, what would it be?
I think I would tell my younger self to not be afraid. And I would say to be bolder. And I would say to compromise less. I think that looking back, being in a white supremacy structure model, it has been challenging. But I think that I would tell myself, don't be afraid, be bolder, and compromise less.
Yep. I know it's interesting that's been a theme, and some of the other people we've talked to that kind of take the risk, do it now, and which calls on us who are not at the beginning of our careers to model it more and support it more. I mean, I think there's a dual demand. Well, Alex, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate this, and we love the work you do is really central and phenomenal. And what I've always one of the things I've most enjoyed about your work is how collaborative, how community, as you say, it's a collective idea. It's not my agency is going to come in and protect and save my kids from those bad people over there. It's like we're here working with the needs of this population with you. And I think that is just such an incredibly wonderful model, and certainly something we need more of across the country and the world. So thank you for being that model.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure.